Welcome to Founder-Led Sales. Today we have a very special guest, friend, dare I say, founder,
Yeah, let's go with
co-founder,
friend.
friend, and co-founder, and CEO of Incident. Welcome, Stephen Whitworth.
Hey Seth, it's always good to have an excuse to see you. I think it happens it used to happen like every week, and now it's sort of, I don't know, twice a year, which makes me a bit
Annual,
sad.
yeah. Well, hopefully I can live up to that expectation of continuing that you want to hope to see me. Let's dive right in. You founder-led sales from the beginning, born out of, it sounds like a need that you had when you were a product manager, and then selling, hiring salespeople, hiring sales leadership, raising more capital, scaling things, scaling from London to the US, all of it, and it all went smoothly, right?
Yeah, it was really, really easy. No stress. We're now doing billions in ARR. It's easy.
Okay, great. So maybe you should just tell everybody what you did so that everyone else can do it as easy. Let's start at the beginning though. So you had this product idea for incident management and you came up with a product. How did you start testing it against the market to identify whether people would pay good money for this product idea that you had?
Yeah, I don't think we honestly even thought about it like that. So I
Okay.
guess some backstory of the company. It was me, my co-founders Pete and Chris. We all worked at a bank in the UK called Monzo. And before that, we had all been engineers at various other startups and bigger companies before that. And what happens is that, you end up being responsible for these systems that you build, which could, at a bank, that might be payment processing or detecting financial crime. I worked at a taxi app competitor to Uber, so you might look after like, I don't know, driver, like the system that like goes and grabs drivers and things like that. And occasionally these systems fail, and when it does, it's usually very stressful and it has a lot of customer impact. And kind of at Monzo, Chris had got annoyed enough about this problem that he'd ended up building internal tooling to go solve it. And a bank does many things, but sort of building incident management tooling probably isn't on the list of things that it like should go do. And it was really a reflection of like what was in the market, and sort of you couldn't really buy anything that solved the problem that he needed solving. And sort of it was the conflation of like me, Pete, and Chris thinking, okay, well, you know, we have this internal tooling, it's been open sourced, but there isn't really a company behind the kind of idea and the concept. And we find it really useful in our roles, and we would have wanted to buy it in all the previous companies we've worked at, but we can't. So go do that. And as sort of a side note, I would say this is a really effective way for like, basically it's a sort of an easy way to get product market fit, because if you're taking things that companies are building internally where the outside version in the market just isn't that great, and they're sort of being forced to build it, well, if they find it useful, you've sort of compressed the product market fit thing down into just like, do other companies find it useful versus the first thing is like, would this even be useful to anyone is like the first product market fit question. So anyway, that side, we ended up building it as a bit of a side hustle to our current Monzo. We spoke with like the CTO and with others, and they totally blessed it. So we went and focused on this, and sort of starting off looked like, building a very minimal first version of it, and then using both our personal network, so, other engineering leaders that we
Sorry,
knew.
sorry. I want to
Yeah,
pause for a second.
yeah,
So I agree with you. I think that's an incredible like genesis of the idea. And I've done this myself with a similar thing of like, I need this. I think it solves it. And then I bring it to the market and they're like, of all the priorities and all the things I've spent money on, the opportunity cost of your thing is just not valuable enough. Right. So I agree with the genesis. And maybe you had even more conviction because you had even more experience of pain. But then the next step is validating it. So you brought an MVP to the market, used your network, and continue. Sorry.
yeah. No, 100%. So we like did a dual thing, which was like, well, hey, you know, it feels a lot easier to just talk to people that we know than it is to go talk to a bunch of people we don't know. So we started off with that. And these were like, companies like Go Cardless and, places we'd worked at before. And then in parallel, we just sort of tweeted that, hey, we're doing this thing. This is the sort of thesis behind why we're doing it, which is you get woken up a lot. It's really stressful. There's nothing that helps you run the process, etc., etc. And then like that tweet went a lot more sort of like, I don't know, a tweet went better. It wasn't viral. Viral is like overdoing it. But it was like, we got like 500 or 600 people saying, I'm interested. I want a demo.
Okay.
Let's speak more. And to me, this is just like a sort of validation, is a validation of the pain, not a validation of the product, because it was like 3 screenshots and there wasn't a thing you could sign up for or anything like that. But that was sort of the first, I guess, confidence instilling moment was, hey, the people that we're talking to about that, like both we think that we would need this. The people
Yeah.
that we're speaking to that we know also think they would need this, and then 500, other people on the internet that I'm really grateful to also think we should need it. And then it goes from, okay, now we've gone from, that to we need a product that is then priced and packaged, and you need to build all of the supplementary stuff around it. But yeah, if I think about like the kind of meaningful moments in the company, probably that tweet is one of them where I'm like, oh, okay, like this thing feels like it's starting to go now versus,
Yeah.
lots of like conversations where I think meh is basically the response that you want to avoid with people, which is like, oh yeah, looks kind of cool. You want people like pounding down your door saying, yes, I wish I had this thing yesterday, even if the thing is 3 screenshots versus
Yeah.
a real product.
I love it. So you went from personal need plus network validation need plus some, I guess, founder-led marketing and tweeting out and seeing if there's an appetite from the market. Um, so then how did you validate the exchange of cash for this brilliant idea?
Absolutely. Labor for capital or whatever the thing is. Yeah, so we then honestly like we started off trying to price and package it, and I think the mechanic was sort of a lot easier back then in that like AI makes this a lot more complicated. But really like for our model, it's mostly about helping humans be more effective when things go wrong in incidents. And as a result, seats is a pretty good place to start. So we then just said, hey, well, you can, and then we had seats and then, plans, I think, which is like, pretty vanilla SaaS pricing. And we just said, hey, well, if you're a startup, you'll pay us like $50 a month. If you're a slightly bigger startup, you'll pay us, $250 a month. And if you're a really big startup, then you might pay us $750 a month. And that was it. I know, like
It's gonna be his only startup plans.
yeah, like honestly,
No real company would actually buy this yet. So we already know that.
like we were not, we were, it wasn't like we were focused. We didn't have like an ICP or anything like that. It was
Yeah.
more just like kind of gradually. I would think of it a bit like a video game, like if you've ever played like GTA or something, where you're
Yeah.
like gradually exploring more of the map. And there's parts of the map where you're like, if I go sell this thing to JP Morgan, like I'm literally, I can't access this part of the map, but there's a bunch of places I've never been before, and like I need to go explore. So yeah, we then ended up essentially the mechanic was, and we were in the middle of COVID, so this is like March 2021. So get up at 5 a.m., open like the incident laptop for 3 or 4 hours before we start work, and sell to, and we were mostly getting sort of inbound interest and working our way through this initial like tweet of like demo requests that people wanted to go see. And that was like get up, sell to Australia and like anyone that was over on sort of like that side of the world. And then write a bunch of code. And then, if we had like an hour for lunch, we would try and sort of fit in, any calls that we could do with like UK companies. And then there was sort of disproportionately a lot of US companies. So that made it easier for then at
Your
5 o'clock
evening
when
time,
you,
yeah.
yeah, when you do like SF and New York and things like that. And
Sounds like a really
yeah,
relaxing phase of your life. Just calm, very calm.
this is honestly like one of the, if I backed out some of the most influential things, it was the fact that there was simply not very much else to do as well. It's like, what am I going to go? I'm going to go for my like one government like sanctioned walk a day that I'm allowed to do in the UK. Like, I've watched Game of Thrones like 8 times at this point. There's a, let's just build a company.
Oh, that's so cool. What up until this point, what were any of the harder phases or the toughest or any mistakes you made up into that point?
Um, Good question. I think one specific mistake, which didn't actually bite us, but now I look back and I'm like, you're just so dumb. Like, don't say that. Is like, I think we
Listen up, founders.
so we had all our pricing on this Notion page, which was totally fine. It's like just go look at this page and that's roughly how much it costs. I think I did one of those little call out things, which is like, and if you sign up, we will give you free access to everything forever for being an early customer. And I'm like, you just like that will bite you, and B, you don't need to do that. People know that what they're signing up for is like, basically they're signing up because of you, not your product as it stands. And as a result, you don't need to promise like the future everything for free. They actually care much more about you and what you're going to deliver than they care about their ability to get it for free. So like, don't specifically focus on that.
Right.
And
I've heard
then,
this
yeah.
recently from two very successful founders. You being one of them.
Oh,
I know
thank
you're
you.
still on the journey, but yes, you made it this far. Um, that people are buying the founder, not the product, in the earliest days. It's like, do I believe in you and trust you? And the value needs to be there, but they're more about buying. If they believe in it all, they're also heavily involved, believing in the founder and buying the founder.
100%. Like I couldn't agree with that more. And if I will skip ahead and then we can go back a bit, but I think it validates the point, which is our first big enterprise customer was Etsy. And the way that we won Etsy as a sort of 7 to 8 person company at that time, I think honestly was just like caring more, being faster and more responsive and implementing more of the feedback. Basically, implementing more of the feedback faster and genuinely caring more about their input. And, our competition at this point is multi-billion-dollar companies that sort of hadn't acknowledged that they even sent any feedback to them, let alone going to build it. Or there were sort of people that were a couple of years ahead of us, but sort of, weren't as responsive. And as a result, I think it is, they knew we were a 7 person company. It's not like this, people in a trench coat where like, they think you're sort of, 20 feet tall. And as a result, like, I think the key reason they picked us, I think the quote was something like, you'd sort of read the feedback and implemented 3/4 of it before one of your competitors had even acknowledged that we'd sent it through. And to me, that was just like, this isn't me trying to sort of, humble brag or something. It's just a really crisp articulation of like, they bet on the team that could deliver the thing and the trajectory as opposed to like how anything looked at that particular time point. And that's sort of stayed true, I think. So we're now about 110 people. And it's that thing just like continually pays back. It's about responsiveness, it's about caring, and it's about the company you'll be in 2 to 5 years is also what they're purchasing, not just like the product as it stands today.
But it is one of the few advantages you have as a startup is they have access to the founder who can promise to do things and execute things, where if your competitor or their alternative is a frustratingly huge company that doesn't care, that's a very different outcome, right?
100%.
Working with the
Yeah.
founder that's like, yeah, I hear you, I'll do the thing. And they're like, oh, wow, our customer service person is a founder who just builds the stuff that we need. And this other person still hasn't gotten back to me, or company. It's not even a person, it's a, yeah, company. It's like a
Yeah,
non-existent
absolutely.
entity that doesn't
Yeah.
care.
It's like, if your competition sends emails that say like, "Dear valued customer,"
Right.
then there's probably an opportunity for you there.
I love it. So you started validating this by signing customers. I have 2 questions. When did you make the leap of faith and go all in? Because that's an inflection point too for you, and the risk that you took. Where are you at in your kind of validation that this is worth going all in on?
Yeah, we probably, I think we resigned when we were about like I don't know, maybe 200 or 300K ARR. And this was not so much a like, and for us, that was, if I back it out, we're probably, what are we doing? Yeah, so we're probably like 50 to 100 customers that we'd signed up by hand and was sort of
Yeah.
working. And
Okay.
we knew we were on the trajectory, but it was really like you know, there was a stream of people that we knew that were buying it from us, and there was a stream of people that we don't know. And it was like, well, actually, if you take the first path of just sell it to people you know, it's like beer money, or like maybe we go build a bootstrapped company. But if the second option is growing and growing fast, then like this
Yeah.
could be a real thing. And then it also means we should probably go raise some cash and like go at, if we're seeing a lot of traction this early. And by the way, I'd worked at startups before where like I realized that like it doesn't normally feel like that. That I was then like, okay, well, early signs point to it being good, which means that there's probably a big pain here. Let's go like, raise cash and do that. So I think that was probably like 2 to 3 months after we launched it. And it was probably more like 100K ARR, 100 and 150K. So we could,
So just that, it just shows that I don't know, you held out for a great degree of conviction before you left your job. I think a lot of people, they have an idea and they leave their job without any market validation. I think most people leave their job before 100, or most founders leave their job before 100K in revenue. Like you guys really stuck to it to really get it validated. It sounds like more than most.
yeah, I think
Maybe
that
it's
was
a personal
because,
dynamic, but
yeah, no, I think it's a good observation. I don't think it was, I honestly don't think it was a like, there was definitely no science around like we will not leave until X happens or occurs. It was just like, hey, we have a day job and we're building this. We were like building what we thought is that we were building a cool thing in the evenings and the weekends, and it just happened that that thing got more traction than we thought it would, and then a business kind of fell out of it versus like, hey, we will have a structured approach to an ICP and we will validate the need and
yeah.
we'll run experiments. It's like,
Well, I would disagree on the falling out. There's a term, this guy, Rob Snyder, who's very thoughtful around product market fit, uses the term pull.
Mhm.
It feels like you were pulled in that
Yes,
direction versus like it didn't fall out. Like, but I like that idea of market pull. Like it pulled you out of your job. It pulled you in that direction. People have been like, yeah, we need this. That's product market fit when you're like, oh, okay, I can serve this market, and it pulls you along. Yeah, that's pretty
100%.
cool.
I
So
agree.
then you hired salespeople and revenue went up and interviews over.
I yes, we then like so what was happening at this point? So we then went from uh kind of me, Pete, and Chris, part-timing things to like we had a reasonably long notice period, and that was like 3 months, I think. So we were sort of at this phase where like the business was ramping up, and like
You were ramping down.
well, it was you had to. Well, there was still like a lot to do. So I was basically
So
feeling
your
quite
day job,
afraid.
were you able to kind of like phase out of that
A little
easier?
bit.
Like, okay.
Yeah, they were good about it, sort of, especially towards the end, where like they could, like I could then do 4 days a week, 3 days a week, etc.
They're very cool.
So that made it easier. And then yeah, we ended up raising capital to go and sort of like hire a bigger team. And then this was, I guess
Wait,
maybe
did you
like
raise before you had left like fully left your job, or when you were raising while you were employed, but you told them you had left and gone all in? Because there's a lot of investors who like we're not investing in someone who's not all in, which is like got to quit your job to prove that you have the conviction to do the thing.
yeah, so we were raising sort of whilst we had full-time jobs, but in the gap between
Okay.
resigning and actually like last day. So it was like I knew I was leaving, but like, I sort of had obligations elsewhere. If I could go back and do the whole thing again and again, it's like, well, this is the successful version of the world, but
Yeah, you might
like
not be here if you did the whole thing again.
I think I would have probably just done it, after 500 demo requests or something. I'd been like, yeah, why not? Let's just go do this thing. That would have still been probably plus 2 or 3 months. So, I don't think it would have bought me material amounts. And raising a seed round sort of whilst you're taking time off from a full-time job, like fundraising does not neatly slot into specific days and specific blocks. So that was sort of hard to navigate, but I did as best as I could to like sort of wall off different things and have things happen on different times. So yeah, we then ended up going full time in June 21. So kind of launch in January, 100K-ish ARR by March, and then hand in notice, and then sort of 3 months
Awesome.
from that
Yeah,
period
cool.
to
I
go
didn't
full
know
time.
that. I'm glad I interviewed. I get to learn more about you. So how about once you were full time, how did the sales go? I assume it was you doing it because you ended up and you still own the sales organization. Um, but how did it go for you personally? And then when did you start thinking about making a sales hire?
Yeah, so it was me and Chris. Chris joined us sort of full time in like September-ish. So there was a period of time where it's basically just me. And the company at this point is me, Pete, Lawrence, and Lisa, who are our first two engineers that joined us, and then Chris. And as a result, like that's the kind of initial unit. So it was me and Chris selling primarily to like UK, sort of UK, EU, and US customers. And that just looks like doing a bunch of demo calls. And our process, sorry, to walk through it was discovery call and demo call in the same, I think, 30 to 45 minutes. And then sort of walk through 2 week trial with some like 2 week trial, get a Slack Connect channel set up, help
You
them
were one of the
however.
first. You were one of the first to do that. That
Yeah,
was a breakthrough. Now everyone's doing that. That
I
was you were the first, or I mean, not maybe not the first. Maybe you were, but early.
Yeah, I think honestly, like it was again, all this stuff might look like we had like a secret master plan. To me, it was just like, well, hey, Slack was very, so Monzo basically ran on Slack. No one would ever email things to each other. And then we took that and we started the company where everyone, all five of us were talking in Slack. And as a result, it was like, well, do we want to email them or do we want to work where we're already working? But yeah, I would say it feels a bit Captain Obvious at this point, but like incredibly useful because it's very hard to ignore a Slack message. Most people need to spend 5 to 9 hours a day in Slack, whether they want to or not. And it just gets to a level of intimacy that I think is actually works really well with the kind of bet that they're trying to take on the founder. It's like, you're not getting an email from some random no reply at thing. It's like literally Steven on the other end saying, hey, X from Etsy, like I just wanted to check in, is there anything we could be doing better? How are you thinking about the product? And as a result, you just get to like go through this loop a lot faster. So you were then at that point like, right, we're in these trials, and it was all hands at the pump, do whatever you need to do, and that could be a variety of like product features that we'd need to implement. It could be random, enterprise readiness stuff. It could be whatever it was. And just essentially, this team of five people is almost entirely focused around either obvious gaps in the product where it's like, well, obviously it needs to do this at some point, like let's go build it. Or it's what is stopping us closing revenue from the people that we're speaking to already that feels legitimate and is on the list of stuff we'd want to go do anyway, and then like great, use that as like our prioritization function, and then just like do as many as you can. One of the things that we didn't do, which came back to bite us a bit later on, was like still a lot of this stuff is just like inbound demo requests and inbound interest. So we didn't spend a lot of time prospecting or learning around like how do we pitch this thing to someone that has little to zero interest in it to sort of spike them. And as a result, it was like an easier version of sales, because this is people that had said they were explicitly interested. But regardless, like we just went, as fast as we could through this group of people and tried to make them as successful as possible. And then by the end of the year, we were probably at like, yeah, I want to say we probably ended the year at like, I don't know, 400K, something like that. So like we kind of we'd had like an initial boost and then like kind of still ramping up. And then we hired our first sales hire in October, I want to say. And that was really about like, okay, how do we make this thing go faster and like add and also add on more expertise. And I think we were sort of maybe overly humble at the start, which was a bit like, we don't really know what we're doing. We need to hire someone that has
But we're
done
running
sales.
really tight sales cycles and closing businesses. It's growing very fast.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
maybe, I
yeah,
don't know,
you would
blame it on
though.
the Britishness or whatever. But it was just like, for example, you would go into calls with procurement and I'm like, don't, I've never even talked to procurement people in any context before, let alone like going and sort of navigating tactics and things like that. So there was a bunch of stuff that we knew we didn't know what to do. But looking back on it, I think we knew a lot more than a lot more
Yeah.
of the stuff that differentiated us in terms of like pain points, personas, how you talk about it, belief, authenticity. That stuff is a huge amount of, I think, an effective sales cycle. So
Oh, you were
yeah,
living it.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So you did make this hire at the right time because you had capacity challenges and you wanted to bring in more sales IQ, which I'm sure you benefited from some learning, hopefully. What would you recommend to founders that are considering buying their first salesperson, fresh off the shelf, um, hiring their first salesperson? Was there any learnings that you look back on that you're like, I wish I had like known these things?
yes, I think so. Like, the guy that we hired, and like I, know him, love him, respect him, invested in the company that he started sort of after we ended up parting ways. We sort of, I would describe it as kind of player coachy style hire. And I think looking back, I would probably have just tried to continually hire more and more reps and make them more and more productive. And then at the point where I'd reached like 6 to 8 reps, and I like all I'm doing is just managing salespeople, and I can't do anything else. It's like, oh, well, great. If I take rough quota, which would be like 800K to $1 million, it's like now I've got a business that feels like it's on the way to doing 5 to 8 million in net new ARR, and that's like a proper business that's working well. I feel like we jumped too early to probably someone that needs to go and manage that team, and it wasn't that this person was unsuccessful. It's more like if I think about the dynamic that will enable you to learn what you need to learn about sort of how salespeople can sell this thing, or like the specific kind of dynamics of um, where they're finding challenges or things like that. Like you'll need to be really close to it. And if you add in a layer of sort of people managing above that, I think it matters more that you learn faster and that you spend more time learning than it does some like kind of efficiency that you might gain from delegating it away. And it's like, actually, no, this kind of is the job until I would have probably like managed the team up until 5 to 10 million in ARR, I think. And maybe that's a little high, but I think it's, just on the whole, it meant that I stepped sort of a little bit further back than I should have. And then like we ended up working like, closely together, me and you, there's a bunch of undifferentiated stuff that you just need to get implemented around like pipeline hygiene and reviews and qualification and stuff like that. And it honestly doesn't need to be that custom to your business. It's like, pick Medic or Bant or Spiced or Champ or whatever it is. Like all you need is like, I would say some external validation on deals. And then, I always have this image of like how they get people onto trains in Japan, which is like the big sort of pushing thing where they're like, pushing people onto the train. It feels like, either like you probably need to be that person for deals, which is like, yeah, again, more tortured analogies, but we have this emoji in Slack, which is called Homer Hedge, which is like Homer sort of walking slowly backwards into the hedge. And that is what I feel a good part of sort of successfully removing yourself from every single deal in founder-led sales looks like is kind of, your job is to go from the deal to a sort of system of deals to then a system of machines and sort of higher level abstractions. And I think the key shift you need to make is like make a small number of reps successful and then be the accountability layer on the top and then hire a leader that can drive that and then, keep going and keep going. And I feel like we jumped probably too early to like go like have someone else manage.
The irony with all of this is I actually think you were more patient than most, maybe other than the first hire, right? Because you indexed a bit for some leadership qualities when, as you said, you probably just should have like really indexed for closing sales qualities and managed that. But I think you held out longer than most. I see most founders fail because they go too fast to layer in those people or get themselves out of sales. And I even think back, like you have not, I mean, I was teasing you, but you've hired sales leaders and parted ways with sales leaders. And then who's the sales leader when they're gone? It's you, right? And if you hadn't built those skills up in the meantime, like we just don't talk to the sales team and hope it all works out. Like it's really about just building that foundation. I don't know, I think even as patient as you've been, you're saying you wish you were even more patient. And I think you're already more patient than most when it comes to kind of getting out of sales or transitioning out and handing it off to somebody else.
That's good to hear. I often get described as, exceptionally impatient. So it's nice to hear some opposing feedback. And
Also pragmatic though. I mean, right? What you just said is pragmatic about hand it off to somebody else that doesn't know what they're doing. Like the business is going to flounder or not at least reach its full potential.
yeah, I think that would be like the meta point I keep coming back to, and it's not sales specific. It's across every aspect of building your company is like, you know, assume that leaders that you bring into the company are very good at the sort of generic aspects of whatever it is that they do, but they don't know it. But you are the best version at it. You are the best version of sort of knowing probably what that looks like at your company. And if you don't, because you've never done it before, then like go do that or learn from it and just sort of try and hone in. And like what that looks like in practice is I think if you wanted to build a scale, the kind of scales of justice or whatever for like what helps close a deal effectively in early stages, it's far more about being able to talk with depth and substance about the problem you're solving with kind of, multiple examples of you having done it before, being really knowledgeable for any specific questions they have and being responsive. And like as a founder, you can probably just do all of those three things in your sleep. What doesn't matter as much at the deal level is like, and do you have a specified project, or do you have budget to deal with this specific problem? And like, please tell me sort of, how much pain you've like all that sort of stuff is useful, but not, but it's not the thing that's going to differentially end up closing the deal. And I think as a
The
result,
generic sales skills sit on top of the true ingredients. The underpinnings are that knowledge, that depth, all of that. So the generic sales skills don't replace that. It sits on top of it.
yeah, exactly. And I think like, I would apply that say for like marketing or like, HR or something like that, which is there's a bunch of like system level stuff that's really, really useful and good that you probably don't know very much about, and the leaders you're bringing in do. And this isn't sort of infantilizing leaders. Like they will learn to kind of understand and have more that nuance, and like they will become super powerful over time. But on day one, they haven't been in an incident before, so they don't know all of this sort of stuff, and it's just a reasonable expectation. But then I think it's your job to give as much of the kind of the nuance, the context, the like why this way for this specific company. And I often think about this in my role is like, am I the best CEO? Like, no. But like, am I the best CEO for this company? I think the answer is like, yes, for now. And like, hopefully it will be in the future. But like, I think the sort of for this company is the thing that like actually matters, because the difference comes in all of the specific nuance of how you go apply these things, not the generic-y sort of systems level stuff, which is important, but isn't the thing that's going to go make the difference. And I've seen that both, in sales, but at every place that I've tried to sort of, so we've done this for marketing, we've done it for customer success, we've done it for people, we've done it for talent. Like there's lots of different scenarios where you've had to go in, spin a thing up, hire someone, like home a hedge out of it. And I think that's the common thing across all of them is the your founder context and how you just end up with a bit of this sort of special sauce that is really hard for people to replicate, and you shouldn't undervalue it and undersell yourself in how important you think it is, and as a result over delegate and get very far away from it. And I think that's one thing that
I like it.
I messed up.
It's actually essential, not like it's the essential ingredient, not the ooh, I want to get out of this. It's like essential to make it work.
100%. And I think people have heard of like founder mode and they may have like various opinions on it. I think the thing that I found very true about how that was about like the main points that were made in that were essentially the kind of you should not view functions as like a black box in which you have no importance or like value to give to the people inside that. It's like actually, kind of everywhere in the company, you can end up applying and sort of giving people some of that extra context and nuance and things that they're trying to learn, but they don't just have yet. And as a result, there's a sort of, I don't know, it's like, you don't know what you know or something like that. And and I think that's a part of the journey I've seen is like stuff that feels obvious to me. People have never encountered it before, so you need to go explain it. And that's why we spend a bunch of time, both with employee-wide onboarding, but my co-founder Chris now runs rep onboarding and like any commercial onboarding. And it's like very specific, structured, what is an incident, what is an alert, why do these things matter, and kind of builds people up. And yeah, I've sort of always tried to keep that in the back of my mind of like, sort of stuff that's obvious to you is not obvious at all to other people. And, but that's the bit where a lot of the difference ends up being made. So your goal is to like continually just try and pass on as much as you can without being the like, just continually talking and like, spouting off.
Yeah. And I don't want to compliment you too much because then you'll have hubris and the thing will all go to shit. But from the outside and from all the engagement I have with anybody in your team, seeing you online, it just comes across as extremely authentic, right? And I think it's because you guys have your fingerprints on all of the things, right? And it's not micromanagement, but it's like almost like micro empowering, micro education, micro cultural influence. I know we're philosophizing now, but that was meant to be a compliment.
I appreciate it. I think, again, like, kind of going back to it, it's like all of this stuff just, stuff just feels really obvious to me. It's like, why would we not tell people, about, so for example, we post a lot on LinkedIn, right? And it's like, well, why do we do that? It's like, well, why wouldn't we? Like, we're trying to build a company and like, we want people that we know to like come work here. And, it's really hard for you to actually understand, like, is a company doing well or not? Because you can't look at the stock filings, you often see companies that have like raised a bunch of money and then like they go bust a few years later. So I sort of view it as like, well, it's a bit of our responsibility to kind of share, progress and how things are going. But also, if you're going to spend 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, for a few years at a job, like why might you want to do it at this specific company? And yeah, I'm just trying to like kind of blip out like what, if you wanted to work here, like I want to give you some signal and some example of how to do that. And then, yeah, just trying to hire people that that sort of exhibit that. And honestly, I always found this a bit difficult so I lived in New York for 2 years, and like because so many of our like initial,
missed you.
Yeah,
we had you and then we lost you. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, it's fine. You've got Chris now. He lives in San Francisco.
That's true. We up leveled. You're right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. like I think one of the things that and we sort of built it out because three-quarters of our customers came from the US, so I ended up, moving over there and building out
Yeah.
go-to-market in the US. I found the sort of authenticity side a little bit harder in Americans, if I'm going to be honest, in that like
Yep.
they were very good at the kind of like extremely polished, just amazing pitches on like personal stories. But as a result, I'm like, if you ask about failure or particularly intense periods of people's lives or something like that, there's sort of a sheen that felt like it's like, hey, we're going to go through some hard times together if you join the company. I would love to kind of feel a bit more of that authenticity. And like, I remember with one of our first hires,
Well, Americans have never gone through any challenges. So that's confusing that you would think that we would have any examples. That's just,
I
sorry. What was your example?
no, I just remember it being with sort of one of our first hires where I literally sort of went back at the end of the interview and I was like, hey, I don't feel like I've got the kind of like mask off version of you. I think you are like really smart and things could work here, but like kind of, I don't know, if I've given you this feedback and like you were just going to be more authentic, like kind of what would you say? And then I was like, oh, great. There's like there is that thing under there. So yeah, I think sort of authenticity I would say is probably like one of the defining characteristics of the company, but um it's still I think the social contract is then you sort of also have to be like authentic and transparent when things aren't going well. Otherwise, you just look like one of the founders that's like only tweets when, they tweet bar charts without the axes of like, MRR and ARR
And
and
they're like,
things like that.
where is the founder right now? I don't know. It's on a beach somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
I have so many more questions, and I want to be respectful of your time so I can get you to come back and I can ask those questions. So I'm going to thank you. I want to thank you, Stephen, for spending the time with us. So much there. We got a little philosophical. I learned a lot, and hopefully the founders took away some practical, tactical advice. And appreciate you being my friend.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me, and sorry I spoke so much and didn't let you ask more questions.
That's the right way to do it. Take care, Stephen.
Cheers, Seth.